Hi, friends. It's Eric here, host Talking with Famous People. Welcome to the live stream that will change everyone's lives forever. Because today you're going to learn the truth about. Come on, in and out, kitty. Oh, in and out, kitty. Can you choose either in or out? Please. Do you mind doing that for me? Hi, Octavio Silva. Yes, you're good enough. I think the reason I titled this is because I think most people's the totality of their fears can be summed up with the question, am I good enough? Like, am I good enough for this person? Am I good enough for this job? Am I good enough for success? Am I good enough to be liked by others? And, you know, it ultimately, it's what it doesn't matter how healthy and developed your self-concept is. I'd like to think I have a pretty healthy and developed self-concept. But we're asked to do so many different things in life, and people have so many different expectations that it's invariably certain that there are going to be certain parts of life that you just don't feel good enough at. Like, you worry. Octavia Silva, your fears can be summed up with the question, is someone going to harm you? Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, why would someone harm you? You know, you can let them know that you're going to tell on them to me if you want. I'll bust their chops. No problem. Okay, so next time you encounter somebody who's possibly your fear is going to harm you, just say, listen, you can go south here. I'm telling host Eric. And they'll be like, okay, never mind. I'm not going to hurt you after all. I do not want to hear host Eric's litany of critiques of me. Well, you can tell me, you can tell Winston's mom. We're both got your back, okay? Lawnmower's not going to harm you. Lawnmower's not going to harm you. He's a Christian. He's a hardcore Christian. He couldn't harm you without incurring massive cognitive dissonance. Am I good enough to get back to packing my messy ass room so we can move out of this house? I sure do hope so. Right. Well, see, it's like whether or not you're good enough, it's a question that is going to hit everybody. But what it's about, that's going to be determinant on circumstances and your own insecurities. Like, one of my lifetime primary fears or something has been, am I good enough sexually? Like, am I going to perform well enough to not be perceived as weak against the alternatives, you know? Something it's always been a weird fear of mine. And I suspect it has to do with 8th slot SE. You know, I remember when I was a teenager, I used to think, like, but how do I know, or that when I go and see her and start touching her and stuff, how do I know that my body's going to do what it's supposed to do? 'And, of course, it's this, super abstract, intellectualized understanding of things. It's unconscious SE, unconscious body stuff. I don't trust my body. I don't trust my physicality at all. If I can't understand it intellectually ahead of time, it's kind of terrifying. And that kind of explains why I'm so relationshipy as well. Because once I'm deep in a relationship, things are pretty natural. And I don't really worry about it too much. But even if things are great and you have a super comfortable relationship, people across the board have sensitivities that people can reignite. That did not happen to me. I'm not talking about this happening to me. Rachel and I are fine. But thanks, Googly eyes. Actually, it's a clever spelling of googly eyes. I appreciate you being here. Yeah, if you trust your partner, you have a lot of space for a mistake, though, because you're able to talk about everything. True. And with Rachel, one thing she's made very clear to me is something that hasn't always been made clear to me in past relationships, which is, like, especially with Kimberly. Kimberly really kicked me in the nuts a bunch about sex stuff. She did quite a number on me. I was as safe a person. I was as safe as a person could be in an abusive relationship, which is to say, in no way was I isolated. And in no way was she able to do her stuff in the shadows. And so, in that sense, I felt safe because when abused, I would go onto the internet and complain about it and win the argument, So, although I didn't, it took me a long time to actually win the argument. Kimberly was very convincing that I was the problem somehow. That's part of the dark triad sort of stuff. Now, she's actually not dark triad, because dark triad is narcissism, antisocial, and what's the other one? Sociopathic? I don't know, but she was BPD, and that manifests as a similar thing. Well, Janine L., this is the thing I've determined since then. With Kimberly and I, we had an ongoing struggle with sex. And basically, it was because Kimberly couldn't really trust. So when I'd initiate sex, the way it would always go down is I'd start initiating sex. She'd make some sort of comment about how I'm doing it wrong to sort of break my confidence down. And then she'd, okay, fine, let's have sex. In other words, to entirely disempower me in the action, time and time and time again. Well, sure, I'm not saying Kimberly should have said I should have been nicer and it was all my fault. I'm saying that Kimberly wasn't. I actually believe I had one conversation with Kimberly, which was very tragic and made me feel very sad. Every day, Kimberly would. She had a tendency to just basically make attacks during the day. And, I say, look, there's no reason to talk to me like this. And I'm not going to tolerate it. You have to, when you come and see me out in the garage, you should say something nice and not something mean, or say something not at all. And the sad conversation was when we were finally breaking up, and she said, Um, I try so hard. I tell myself, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then at some point, I may be able to hold out for 5 hours, but then at some point it bursts out again. And I was like, oh, you're trying. It's like, I didn't even know she was trying because it didn't seem like it. But what I understood at the end was she was doing the best she could to be decent. And her distrust was so deeply embedded, it was simply impossible for her. She had learned to suffer. God, how can you not despise her for what she did to you? That is infuriating to hear. It's because I like Kimberly. I still like Kimberly. I still feel somewhat sad. There's no way she can be in my life. She said early on, and she was right, we would have been better off as friends. I could see myself being friends with Kimberly. Not now, obviously, but I liked her. She had a basic childlike goodness to her. It wasn't ever directed to me, but to everybody else and all the animals around her and stuff. She had a deep goodness about her that was unruined by all the damage she'd suffered. She had taken all of her ruin and crammed it into direct at relationship partner. How do I start panicking sufficiently? Don't bother. Look, when you're packing, just try not to pack carefully. Try to just shove everything in whatever. So the thing is, you are good enough. And you don't have to be the best to be good enough. One thing that we tend to not remember when we ourselves are feeling not good enough is that everybody else is feeling the same way. Everybody else is feeling not good enough too. That chances are, if you're having a conflict, no matter how it's being phrased by the other party, which is probably what you're doing wrong, underneath there's some fear that they're not good enough. When you're sure that you're sure of your own worth and you're careful to be correct, then you don't really have anything to worry about. The other person may not be where you are yet enough to sustain the relationship. But the challenge when people are difficult or mistreat us in some way, the biggest challenge is to be unwavering in our sense of self. If you don't feel good enough, you have an imbalance to solve. So that's how you grow or possibly crumble. And if you have more than one or two rooms, mark the room on the box. I mean, the thing is, we have in childhood, we are raised on the idea of performance. Perform well, get some symbol of good performance, like a grade, a star, a sticker, whatever. Perform poorly, suffer usually unnatural consequences. So if you're going to structure childhood well, you'd encourage your children to do the things they need to do to develop a sense of self that's secure and constant. And if they make mistakes, to the extent that it's necessary for there to be consequences, they should be naturally occurring consequences, not imposed consequences for behaviorist purposes. And beyond that, it's I think it's very important that you actively protect your kids from the narratives of the world and warn them. You know, people are going to attack in the following ways. These attacks are not indicative of anything about you. They're indicative of something about them. And at the same time, you should be open to criticism and be objective about yourself. The thing is, Delilah got raised in a household which was possibly very unusual, in which my number one concern was that she not make bad arguments. So it was like she learned early on that the best thing to do was to engage in some manner of objective self-criticism, regardless of what we were talking about, to at least demonstrate that she was capable of being reasonable about things. And I would always do the same. You know, resolving a fight is a matter of power exchange. So if you're in a conflict with somebody, and this is something that could never work with Kimberly. It never worked. In a healthy relationship, if there's a fight, one party then goes, you know what? I'm sorry I said, yeah, that was wrong of me. You were right about that. And the other party goes, and I'm sorry I did, yeah, because I was wrong about that and you were right about that. And then that's the steps by which you reach reconciliation. In other words, reconciling any fight means switching from talking about what your partner's doing wrong to talking about what you did wrong. I trained Delilah to do that for her whole life. There were no unfair fights in my house. And there was no acceptability to irrational justifications. Zero. If you did not have a good justification for something, then the thing you were saying was to be dismissed, ignored, and shat upon. I mean, that's how I was raised too. In my home, every time there was a spat between my parents and me in some way, it ended with me saying, Mom, I'm sorry I did meow. And Mom saying, and I'm sorry I did meow. And us hugging it out. The only acceptable way to end any conflict is to resolve it. You can't leave it unresolved or it'll fester. I think people who have been raised with punishment find it hard to admit when they're wrong. I mean, I got punished occasionally as a kid, but my punishments were weird. Like one time, me and my friend burned down the clubhouse back behind this room. There used to be a clubhouse back here. This didn't used to go back so far. Anyway, my friend and I burned it to the ground. We were playing, let's light this on fire. And my punishment was my parents coordinated with a teacher at school to make me stay in from recess and write an essay about the risks of fire. That was my punishment. I remember being particularly bothered by it because I didn't think it was fair that they include my teacher in the matter, because that was telling my teacher something she didn't need to know. It was an FE thing, right? It was like, I didn't want other people to know I had done this. So I didn't like the fact that my parents included my teacher in it. But, as punishments go, it's an appropriate punishment. It says, at least this will compel you to consider the warrants. And I beyond that, it's like I only got hit one time in my family. My mom slapped me. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was extremely rude and unacceptable. And instead of he just slapped me, I was shocked. I was so shocked. You hit me. Oh. Of course, I'm sure my mom apologized profusely. I don't remember that part, but I did learn not to. I did learn to watch my mouth a little bit, you know. But yeah, it's the thing. The key thing in a healthy family is everybody takes responsibility for their wrongdoings and apologizes and makes amends, you know. And so no fight persists more than one day. Nobody goes to bed mad. Nothing's left unresolved. I was probably like 10 or 11. I didn't cry. I don't remember, but I suspect she did. My mom always cried at the drop of a hat. It was just like, just about anything make her cry. You know, and it's like I remember one time I said what was much more effective way to teach me was one time I said something mean to my mom, and she just said, you know, hey, that really is kind of hurtful, and I burst into tears and ran into the bathroom trying to figure out what had happened, like what was going on with me right then. It's bipolar, you know. I couldn't stand the emotions I felt. It was horrifying. But, you know, probably most importantly is I was always permitted to make my case. It didn't matter. Like my parents ruled against me on something. They knew I was going to come back to them with some pictures I had drawn and some explanations. I remember trying to win the argument that I shouldn't have to use shampoo. And I drew a picture of a head with little dots on it that represent dirt and water, and showing how all the dirt would wash away just from the water. You don't need any soap. And they patiently listened to me make my case and ruled against me. I didn't feel in that instance as though they'd given me good reasons why I was wrong about this. But at least they listened to my case, gave it their serious attention. Hi, baby.
Hi. Aww. It's a live stream event. Hi, Pete.
Huckleberry, do I think you may be an NFJ? I mean, I think you're an ENTJ based on our conversation. If you were an NFJ, I think you'd have. Well, you're not an ENFJ. If you were an ENFJ, it'd be right on the SI. If you were an INFJ, you don't have enough SI to be an INFJ. But I'm sticking with ENTJ because here's the thing: you don't have enough SI to be an INTJ, and you got too much FE to be an INTJ. But Bernie Fox, that's not a bad typing. I don't agree with it, but you could be right. I don't agree with it right now, but it's not. It's possible time will prove you right and me wrong on that. That would have been smart on their part, Raphael. Except, you know what I would have said? I would have said, well, fortunately, when I take a shower, it's never the case that I'm trying to wash butter out of my hair. But of course, my parents were right. You need shampoo because there's oils and stuff that get. But see, I didn't understand. I didn't understand until college. Somebody finally explained to me, and I frequently had wondered about this. Like, I do not understand soap. Why do we use soap? Why don't we just use water? Water washes stuff off just fine. And it wasn't until college my friend Chris Moore told me, actually, soap disrupts the chemical bond between oil and surfaces. And I was like, oh, that's why we use soap. Until you see that's being a very abstract person. You might think my experience would have been able to convey to me that soap removes oils in a way that just water doesn't. Nope. I needed to understand it abstractly first before I could see any point to soap. Until I understood why it wasn't unnecessary, I assumed it was unnecessary. JK, I can type you today a little later if you want to email me and book a slot. Let me check my calendar, see what I got going on today. Okay, looks like I've got absolutely nothing going on today. So there you go. My schedule is wide open. Your Huckleberry looks like an NFJ and he looks like Angantyr, but he writes in at the interest of an INTJ, and he has a leaning in his conversation that seems idealistic, humanistic. I mean, I see him as being burdened by a lot of bullshit, frankly. And I see him as emerging from that burden and that bullshit as we speak. When you are an NTJ, you have an equivalent struggle that I have. When you're an NTJ, when you're an ENTP, you're constantly seeing people use language wrong, say stupid stuff, not justify stuff adequately, and it's frustrating, But when you're an NTJ, you're constantly seeing people doing things wrong and dumbly and inefficiently, and being oblivious when you point out this stuff or being irritated or whatever. It's frustrating, I'm sure. Did Rachel arrive just now? Later, when she gets a chance, will she show you the quartz you guys collected yesterday? If she has a piece of it that she has out here, sure, I'm sure she'll show you the quartz. I put all the pieces of rocks that I found in the aquarium. I don't really want to reach in there and get them.
They look nice.
They look nice in the aquarium. And of course, the thing is, whether or not you're using language wrong in a way that matters, this is the small piece that she kept out of the aquarium to join her little rock collection over there. You want to see her rock collection? Here, put that next to your other rocks. Next to the other rocks. And then show them the rock collection with this camera.
Okay.
Let me do this. There's a little more slack for you.
Cool.
So those are her rocks. You look at that and make sure it's in the center, and I'll do the look to it. There. Okay, so this rock, what's this one, Rachel?
Red jasper.
Red jasper. This is an orange rock.
That is carnelian.
Carnelian. This is
That is selenite.
Selenite.
Stick.
This is a yellow rock.
Yellow, orange calcite.
This is a green rock.
Green aventurine.
This is a blue rock.
Blue, that's labradorite. Or I'm sorry, apatite. It's apatite.
It's apatite.
Yeah, blue apatite.
This looks like amethyst.
Yep.
This looks like some kind of quartz, maybe?
Clear quartz.
Clear quartz. This is I don't know what this is.
It's like an arrowhead of snowy quartz.
That's a snowy quartz arrowhead. It has sharp edges. You chop stuff with it. This is rose quartz.
Yeah.
And the stick.
It's Palo Santo.
Palo Santo. You burn that stick and it smells good.
Yeah.
That's
I like
the
the way it
purpose.
smells.
I like the way it smells. Yeah. That's the purpose of that stick. Octavia Silva is calling you out, Rachel.
What?
She's saying that looked like green calcite to me.
Well, I would have thought the same, but it came in a package where it labeled the stones. So
Official rock sellers named that rock Mia.
yeah.
So you're wrong. You're not an official rock seller.
Thanks, Winston's mom.
My dad cooks fish sticks with a lid on so they get soaky and mushy for 8 years. That sounds like a bad way to cook fish sticks.
Yeah, it does.
Why is that anyway? If you all listened to us, then we could quickly and efficiently utilize everyone's time better. That's achieving maximum potential and self-actualization, but save some money. I mean, yeah, the reason why NTJs and NTPs are both frustrated is because of the same basic warrant, but different justification. Basically, TE DOMs, TE Tool are thinking, INTJs, ENTJs are thinking, if you listen to us, we'd achieve much better outcomes. ENTPs and INTPs are thinking, if you listen to us, we wouldn't achieve such bad outcomes. And the fact is, if the INTJs, ENTJs, ENTPs, and INTPs work together, it would look like this. ENTJs and INTJs would constantly be trying to revise their solvency plans to meet the minimum justification criteria of the TI users.
Oh, that's why you were like that. EP.
All right, Trouble.
Are you guys friends?
They're almost friends, I think.
I think it's almost correct. Almost is definitely the word.
It's possible they're frenemies.
I think so. I think that's more possible.
I think they're frenemies.
Yeah.
When they see each other at a party, they're overly politely nice to each other. Oh my gosh, Trouble!
Especially if we're allowed.
It's so good to see you.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they part,
Totally.
Is not the underlying principle of a fish stick crispiness?
Yeah.
Bill Burkett, yes, it is. You speak truth. Do you want to see my rock collection? That's a good pickup line.
That is a good line.
If it's from a girl, that guy's gonna be like, "You have a rock collection?" If it's from a dude, you can always later on say, "Yeah, I got 2 rocks right below my schlong. Want to see them?" So the question: are you good enough? For everybody who, in any given instance, feels as though they didn't perform well, there's a risk of ontologizing that and saying, this is representative of who I am. I am a failure at Mia. So, like, let's say you're just barely starting to date somebody, and you know, did you watch it, Email Anthrax? Nice.
Thanks.
I'm completely any thoughts I was having are just collapsed because email Anthrax asked me a confusing question. Are you talking about the edited one? The edited one? Not the live stream? I mean, obviously you found it inadequate in some way. You didn't think it was a good idea? It could come off as gaslighting? How's it gaslighting? I'm responding exactly to what he says. I didn't even cherry pick anything. Well, I mean, look, INFJs are always going to err on the side of caution that something might not play well, right? Except it's such as what? I mean, I make judgments about his type. I say he's clearly a TE Dom. This is why he thinks meow. I mean, the point of that video in part was to say this person's not being willfully malignant. He's incidentally malignant. I appreciate you looking out for me, email Anthrax, but I think Brain Fox, we got your message. I appreciated that. Here's the deal. There's nothing abusive in that video. It is as legitimate as it can get. I am responding to what he's saying. The things he's saying about ISTPs are totally wrong. His positioning of helping people, making you grow is Orwellian doublespeak. As far as he's concerned, interfacing with anybody is helping them as long as you can articulate some benefit as you perceive it. But he's actually hurting people. There's no doubt about that because you can't help people with the truth if the things you're saying to them are wrong. Well, that's 8 slot, Huckleberry. The reason you think you're primarily people-focused, although it's using a utilitarian frame, is because in the modern world, there are very few TE things that are isolated outside of people. In the modern world, most specific logics or there's physical dynamic systems are actually protocols for managing people and organizations. So the thing is, you will be people focused in that sense, but not so much individual focused. In my experience with ISTPs, information is accurate. Well, what do you think he means by the purpose of an ISTP is to be a teacher? That they are somehow not fulfilling their ISTP destiny if they are not being a teacher. Now, granted, I know he doesn't mean necessarily a teacher as a profession, but I've not encountered myself ISTPs best realizing what they want, for example, by ignoring what's correct and just interfacing. They're not interface types. They're TE ignoring. They're FE fourth. And if, in fact, he's saying, well, this is how you bolster your weaker aspects, that's more TE frame. That's not a good idea to do in cognitive functions. I mean, more importantly, he says a lot there, right? Even though it's just 5 minutes worth of him talking. When he says people above you, people below you, it's that 8 slot FE. People are useful in a hierarchical structure, and they're useful in the following sense. People above you, you learn from. You know you can learn from them because they're above you. You know what they're saying is right because they're above you. And people below you learn from you. You know they're wrong and you're right because they're below you. I mean, I didn't think he was attacking a person. I don't think he was attacking anybody. I think he was revealing how malevolent it is to fail to think about things adequately and to just operate on your assumptions. Yeah, status, I guess. I mean, that's the thing. If you think of people as being above or below, what you're saying there is, I don't need to deliberate about anything. People above me are right. People below me are wrong. It's more indication of his non-deliberative heuristics. If you don't have any NI to judge the truth of things, you just go with your heuristic. The person who's the expert is right. The person who's not the expert is wrong. He's declared himself expert status. No, I know he didn't explicitly say that. You're asking me to interpret what he meant, or in order to discuss this, we need to interpret what he said means things. You can dispute my interpretation, but you can't dispute my interpretation by saying it's not a quote, because it's not trying to be a quote. It's trying to be an interpretation. Stop trying to educate yourselves and help people. Those were his exact words. Now, more or less what that's saying is be more interfacey. What does he mean by help people? Does he mean carry their groceries into the car for them? No, he means help them by solving problems they can't solve. Which is, basically C.S. Joseph is saying, be me, be like me, and do what I should do to maximize my being. I don't think he's even understanding that he's projecting his own frame onto this type. Ronnie Fox, you might be right about Huckleberry and INTJ. He just seems a little... it's not like he's FE skilled, more like FE aware and annoyed by FE. I don't think INTJs are typically annoyed by FE. I think it just sort of escapes their grasp. We're going to make a video, hopefully today, Rachel and I are, which the concept of which is this. And it's prompted by the fact that I said to Rachel the other day, it's a lot better when I move this thing back and the table's over here because we have easy flow through. You don't have to worry about ducking around something. It's easy to get through the room. And she said, so I said, oh, this is TE preferable, basically. And she said, yeah, it looks nice. It's like she's mistaking TE for FE. And I was thinking there's equivalence for everybody, right? Like for me, if somebody says, oh, I feel really good about this, I'd say, yeah, it makes sense. It's mistaking FI for TI. If, let's say it were SENE, it would be like, hey, I need you to do A, B, and C. And then the INTP goes, okay, well, I'll email you my questions then about that. It's like, no. That's not doing it. That's talking more about it. Let's say it were SINI. It's like, somebody goes, like an NI person says, well, you don't want to look anytime you start saying acting like you're more of an expert than the expert you hired, you're gonna have some problems. And the SI person will go, yeah, that happened once with me and blah 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 blah. Well, that's not NE, that's not NI, that's SI. You could also mistake SI for FI. I'm so sad right now. I mean, you're tired and hungry. You could mistake NE for SE the other way. All right, so can you please help me? I need you to help me come up with some different possible ways that we could potentially approach them and ask for a basket. And, oh, you wanted me to wait? He's got the basket already. That's mistaking those two. Which ones have I forgotten? There's TE for FE, TI for FI. So I guess it's like instead of saying, "Oh, I feel really good about this," that makes sense. You go, well, that seems logically consistent. And the person goes, "I know, it feels right to me." Well, that's not the same thing at all. The thing is, you can mistake your second for your seventh, or you can mistake your fourth for your seventh. So let's say I've got NI tool and I'm an ENFJ, and I might go, somebody might say to me, so please give me some examples from your experience as to why you think this is true. And the ENFJ will go, well, first A, and then that's a B, and if A and B, then C, and so that's why I concluded C. Well, that's not an example. That's not an example of what you're saying. That's the logical reason why we should agree with it. The other way around, if you're TI polar and you're an ENFP, for example, and somebody says, "Can you please explain your justifications for this?" The ENFP will give examples instead. What's another one? So it's like, let's say you're TE polar. Sometimes Rachel will mistake TE for SE. That's harder to describe, but very likely to happen. That if something requires TE, she'll just start doing stuff until she either gets it or gives up without actually trying to do the TE on it. I have another great example of how I'm backslot TE and the difference between a TE user and a TI user. We have a bathtub that has a drain in it, obviously, and it's a drain where if it's up, it's just got like a little metal circle, and if it's up, then there's a gap between the circle and the drain, and then when you turn the thing, it closes and it goes down into the hole, and it fills the hole up, right? Well, this circle thing is attached to a long thing, and it came out. It was pulled all the way out. And I tried to put it back in, and I couldn't get it to go back in. I just tried to move it around. It wouldn't go all the way back in. I couldn't figure out what was the problem with it. So that's me SEing instead of TEing, okay? In that instance, I'm saying, I never asked myself, how does this thing work? I just said, this goes in that hole. Let me see if I can push it in there. Maybe if I push harder, it wouldn't go in there. If I were a TE user, if I had decent TE at all, it would have occurred to me, maybe I need to turn this thing, that the drain's either closed or open, and that's why I can't shove it in there. It was like 2 weeks later that I was like, wait a second. Maybe if I turn this and push this in, it worked. So, of course, if you don't think about how the drain system works at all, that turning this thing has something to do with this thing down here, then when you go to fix the drain problem, you just shove it in there and give up. Right? That's what both Rachel and I did. I'm not even sure if Rachel attempted to shove it in there. She probably figured she was afraid she was going to break it more.
I did. Yeah, I was afraid I was going to break it more.
So, TE polar, afraid you're going to break it more. TE countervalued, just shove it. If it hopefully it works. If it doesn't, then give up. Do you have a magic marker? If you do, would you please draw a smiley face with big eyebrows and a handlebar mustache on the fly swatter and hold it up in front of your face? You need to start it. It's too much work. Do you think that mistakes with your seventh function often come off as mistakes with your fourth function for people? I think they mistake them as that. So when I am, let's say I have a legitimate reason to be emotionally distressed. Let's say when I was with Kimberly and was also often subject to FI difficulties, like FI attack. My very frequent solution would be like, okay, I need to get some sleep. I need a meal. The actual truth is, okay, I need to leave this toxic relationship and get away from the abuse. But that would be an FI conclusion. So I conclude I need a good night's sleep and some food.
I was just sleep last night.
I'm mostly a massive fantasy guy for the most part. Lord of the Rings and the like. For some reason, Turbo Kid comes to mind for a more obscure experience. I'm also a big fantasy guy. You're aware. I love fantasy movies. I love swords and dragons and magic and stuff. Bye, Octavia Silva. We'll miss you.
Bye.
Have a nice day. I'm sorry that you, Eric read Winston's mom's message. I'm sorry that you are having a bad day or whatever it was you were saying before. I'm sorry you weren't raised like I was raised. I'm sorry you had a difficult childhood.
Me too.
It makes me sad. Oh, here's Octavia Silva's rock collection.
Cool.
Wow, you got a whole heart-shaped basket full of rocks.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. We both have a rose quartz heart. We're soul sisters.
I don't think you showed them your rose quartz heart, though.
I'll show it. One time we did.
Ooh la la. This is representative of love. American style. Thank you, darling.
Yeah.
TE polar definitely makes you afraid you would make things work. I've encountered that on a few occasions where Rachel's encountered some sort of problem and has come to tell me about it rather than attempt to fix it. And fairly early on, but we correctly communicated to each other that she's concerned she's going to make it worse. And I correctly communicated to her, good, then do this. Don't start. It's like, don't try to plunge the toilet yourself, please, because it's going to end up with water all over the floor and poop on the floor and stuff, and then I'm going to have to help clean it up. So I'd rather you just call me in to plunge the toilet for you. Then, if I get water on the floor, I have only myself to blame. There's a lot of stuff like that. I'd rather just, if she's not comfortable doing it, I'd rather do it for her. Because, of course, I countervalue TE. So I don't give a fuck if her TE is good or bad at all. I appreciate the fact that because her TE is so polar, I don't really have to worry about her busting my chops about my bad TE.
No. And you don't bust my chops about my bad FI.
Right. I don't even know how. That's the thing. It's like, just like I don't even know how one would bust one's chops about FI. She probably feels the same way about TE.
Well, I get busted sometimes. So one time, I don't know.
No, I'm saying I don't know how I would bust your chops about FI. You know how it feels to get your chops busted about TE,
Yeah.
and I know how it feels to get my chops busted about FI, but I wouldn't even begin to know how to bust somebody else's chops about FI. It's like, what would you say? You're being mean, I guess?
Yeah, I guess.
I guess you're being mean is busting so much chops about FI. I guess I thought it would be more complicated than that.
I feel like, okay, so I remember this was one time last year when we were on one of the tour buses, and I would listen to my music, and my brother was like, your music's really loud, everyone can hear it. That's not, I wasn't putting I didn't give an F about anyone else on that bus. I was so tired.
That's an FE consideration, though.
Uh,
That's not FI. The FI thing was your brother didn't care about your FI, which is what you
True.
wanted to do. And he was asking you to not care about your FI to turn on the music for the FE reasons.
Gotcha.
Your Huckleberry, have you read about DMT being produced during meditation when the pineal gland is open? Joe Rogan talks about this. Flying Fox says, I was trying to take a shelf out of the fridge the other day and I messed around until I was afraid it was going to snap. So I made my mom do it too. Do it, Lamau. Hodge Brew, you're being fake too or not authentic. I am? Me? Right now? I mean, fake? I don't feel fake. Shallow, maybe?
Booty kitty.
You know, it's weird. I don't think I've ever had anybody call me shallow before. I don't consider myself particularly deep. I think of more FI as having that kind of depth to it. But I don't recall anybody ever calling me shallow. Shallow would seem to be... Or are you saying that's an example of bad FI? Oh, I see. Okay. That's an example of bad FI? To criticize someone on FI. You're being fake or not authentic or shallow. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That'd be a FI criticism. I got you. Huckleberry, where did you go to try ayahuasca? I would like to. I've heard that that's a drug, some sort of psychedelic drug, right? But I don't know really anything else about it. I'm curious about it. Ayahuasca. Interestingly, I do think that shallow is a critique that an FI person might make, saying that somebody else has poor FI. But oddly, I don't think most people would think I'm shallow, even though I'm FI polar.
Yes.
So it's got some additional meanings to it.
A magical wonder.
You may have heard stories of people traveling to foreign destinations to experience taking ayahuasca, a psychoactive brew. Typically, these anecdotes tend to focus on the immediate effects that take place during the ayahuasca trip, some of which are enlightening, others of which are downright distressing. However, scientists have uncovered several long-term health benefits. Let's see.
It can make you puke.
Ayahuasca, also known as the tea of the vine and La Purga, is a brew made from the leaves of the Psychotria viridis shrub, along with the stalks of the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, though other plants and ingredients can be added as well. The drink was used for spiritual and religious purposes by ancient Amazonian tribes, and is still used as sacred beverage by some religious communities in Brazil and North America, including Santo Daime. Traditionally, a shaman or curandero, an experienced healer who leads ayahuasca ceremonies, prepares the brew by boiling torn leaves of the Psychotria shrub and stalks of the Banisteriopsis vine in water. The Banisteriopsis vine is cleaned and smashed before being boiled to increase the extraction of its medical compounds. When the brew has reduced to the shaman's liking, the water is removed and reserved, leaving behind the plant material. The process is repeated until a highly concentrated liquid is produced. Once cooled, the brew is strained to remove impurities. The main ingredients of ayahuasca, Banisteriopsis and Psychotria, both have hallucinogenic properties.
Oh.
Psychotria viridis contains DMT. And DMT has low bioavailability as it gets rapidly broken down by enzymes called monoamine oxidase, MAOs, in your liver and gastro tract. For this reason, DMT must be combined with something containing MAO inhibitors, which allow the DMT to take effect. Banisteriopsis contains potent MAO inhibitors called B-carbolines, which also have psychoactive effects of their own. When combined, these two plants form a powerful psychedelic brew that affects the central nervous system, leading to an altered state of consciousness that can include hallucinations, out-of-body experiences, and euphoria. Well, where do I get these plants? I want to grow some of these plants. Is it easy to grow them?
I've heard people throw up from it.
I mean, that's true for mushrooms too. What always happens when I take mushrooms is I eat them, and then I have a period of time, about 10 minutes, maybe 30 to 45 minutes after I've eaten them, where I either puke or feel very pukey, and then it passes and I'm fine.
Ah.
It's like every time. Ayahuasca ceremony is usually held at night and lasts until the effects are worn off. After the space is prepared and blessed by the shaman, it's offered to participants. After consuming the ayahuasca, most people start to feel its effects within 20 to 60 minutes. The effects are dose dependent, and the trip can last 2 to 6 hours. Now, this is interesting because people who've taken DMT, like straight up DMT, it doesn't last very long.
I have El Bongo.
Oh yeah, what did I do with it? I used it and then I lost it. Is it over there?
Oh yeah, it is. Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hello.
It's just, yeah, it's good TE going around.
Yeah.
Some adverse effects, such as vomiting and diarrhea, are considered a normal part of the experience. Some experience euphoria and enlightenment. Others go through severe anxiety and panic. It's not uncommon for those taking ayahuasca to experience both positive and negative effects from the brew. The shaman and others who are experiencing ayahuasca offer spiritual guidance to participants through the ayahuasca experience and monitor participants for safety. Some retreats have medical staff on hand as well in case of emergency. These ceremonies are sometimes conducted consecutively, with participants consuming ayahuasca a few nights in a row. Potential benefits. Many people who have taken ayahuasca claim that the experience led to positive long-term life-altering changes. This may be due to the effects of the ayahuasca on the neurological system. Recent research has shown that it may benefit brain health in a number of ways. The active ingredients have been shown to exhibit neuroprotective and neurorestorative qualities in some studies. DMT activates the sigma-1 receptor, a protein that blocks neurodegeneration and regulates the production of antioxidant compounds that help protect your brain cells. A test tube study including indicated that DMT protected human brain cells from damage caused by lack of oxygen and increased cell survival. Harmine, the main B-carboline in ayahuasca, has been found to have anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and memory-boosting effects in test tube and animal studies. It has also been observed to increase levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF, a protein that plays an important role in nerve cell growth and promotes nerve cell survival. Additionally, a test tube study demonstrated that exposure to harmine increased the growth of human neural progenitor cells by over 70% in 4 days. These cells generate the growth of new neural cells in your brain. Research has shown that it may increase mindfulness capacity of your brain and improve your overall psychological well-being. A study in 20 people indicated that consuming ayahuasca once weekly for 4 weeks was as effective as an 8-week mindfulness program at increasing acceptance, a component of mindfulness that plays a fundamental role in psychological health. Other studies have found similar results. A study in 57 people demonstrated the ratings of depression and stress were significantly decreased after the participants consumed ayahuasca. These effects were still significant 4 weeks after the ayahuasca consumption. They're mostly attributed to the DMT and B-carbolines in ayahuasca. Some research suggests ayahuasca may benefit those with depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and addiction disorders. A study of 29 people with treatment-resistant depression showed that a single dose of ayahuasca led to significant improvements in depression severity compared with placebo. Other studies report rapid antidepressant effects as well. Additionally, a review of 6 studies concluded that it showed beneficial effects in treating depression, anxiety, mood disorders, and drug dependence. Several studies have focused on the effects of ayahuasca on addiction disorders, including addictions to crack, cocaine, alcohol, and nicotine, with promising results. In one study, 12 people with severe psychological and behavioral issues related to substance abuse participated in a 4-day treatment program that included 2 ayahuasca ceremonies. At 6-month follow-up, they demonstrated significant improvements in mindfulness, hopefulness, empowerment, and overall quality of life. Plus, self-reported use of tobacco, cocaine, and alcohol significantly declined. Ayahuasca can interact dangerously with many medications, including antidepressants, psychiatric medications, drugs used to control Parkinson's disease, cough medicines, weight loss medications, and more. People with a history of psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia should avoid ayahuasca, as taking it could worsen their psychiatric symptoms and result in mania. See, the thing is, I want to grow these plants myself so that we don't have to worry about, meowing the meow. Where can I buy this? Can I buy seeds for this? Let's see. Seeds. It's a member of the coffee family. It costs $10. I mean, 10 euros to 20 euros. Back in stock July 29th. We offer you viable seeds from Ecuador. We met this family years ago and are proud that we are allowed to sell the sacred plants they take care of. By buying from us, you enable us to support this family, blah, 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 blah. They've got these other things too. What's this? African dream root? Have you ever heard? Has anybody ever heard of African dream root? It's called Synoptolepsis kirkii. Huh. The whole root of this sacred plant. Our African dream root comes from South Africa. In Africa, the plant is commonly known as Uvuma amholopi. Let's try looking it up for that. Well, let's see what it says it does. This has been and still being used traditionally to induce visions and assist the traditional diviners to have clarity in their trance visions. It's believed that the roots have the ability of connecting one with his or her ancestors. In other places, this plant was used to induce deep sleep to those who lack the urge to sleep. It has some traditional uses in Africa. There, its roots are combined with many other herbs to produce a potion called ubu lawu. Ubu lawu was utilized to cause dreams, to make one enter into a trance, and an emetic that eliminates toxins and unproductive body energies. It's a shrub, and its roots. I didn't say what drug's in it. Oh, curcumin, which is a powerful neurotropic. Curcumin, a new Daphne orthoester with potent neurotropic activity from Synaptolepsis kirki. What is it? What is a Daphne orthoester? Okay. This is getting too biology on me, too chemistry on me. I don't like that. The potent irritancy of the Daphne orthoester resiniferatoxin. It's some sort of toxin, I guess.
Yeah, it's in the name.
Huh. African dream root. Maybe I just Google African dream root instead. African dream root. Oh, they have a different name for it here. Silene capensis. Okay, I don't know Wikipedia. They always have the best stuff. Okay. And onerogen, from the Greek, meaning dream, is that which produces or enhances dream-like states of consciousness. This is characterized by an immersive dream state similar to REM sleep. Many dream-enhancing plants, such as dream herb, an African dream herb, as well as the hallucinogenic diviner stage salvia, have been used for thousands of years in the form of divination through dreams called, I had no idea, there's a word that is the magic of divining things from dreams. It's called, I have to see how it's pronounced. Oneromancy? Oneromancy? Is that how it's pronounced? Let's see. This is a cool new word. Interpretations of dreams in order to foretell the future.
Oniromancy.
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 The interpretation of dreams in order to foretell the future is oniromancy.
Wow.
Next time somebody says, like, I had this dream, so I think, yeah, I'm like, what are you, an oniromancer? Oniromancy.
Doesn't look like it's said that way.
Isn't that a great new word, everybody? Oniromancy? Don't you want to say it right now? Did Eric and Rachel break up? No. Why would we break up? She's right there.
Hi.
Chilling, spilling, and also drilling.
Yep.
You'd rather be wicked than judgmental? I mean, wouldn't you consider that judgmentalism is a form of wickedness if it's deemed judgmental rather than simply passing appropriate judgments, you know? Let's see what's going on here. Is Raphael engaged in his anti-drug propaganda? Let's see.
It's another thing that ENFPs and INTJs have in common.
I'm sorry, say again?
It's another thing that INTJs and ENFPs have in common. I know a lot of ENFPs who are either only drink or they're sober, and INTJs seem to like dabble with drugs, but inevitably end up only thinking alcohol is the most appropriate.
Flying Fox 32, I want to answer this question. I think it's a good one. Hey, Eric, is SE just doing things or does it have more factors to it? It has more factors to it, but fundamental to it is this notion that one addresses things in the world, or one is in the world through action. So an SE Dom is going to, when in doubt, kick the anthill. When in doubt, just do it. Like the NE Dom is going to sit at a table across from some other table where there's some girls at, and is going to think or talk about whether or not he should go talk to that girl. And if he decides he is going to, how he should go talk to her and what he should say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The SE Dom enters into that moment knowing implicitly that what's generally unmatched in efficacy is just doing something, keeping the other person off balance. The ESTP doesn't think they need to know what they're going to say when they go over there. It's the action itself that's going to enable them to then use their TI to act, deliberate as their kind of pseudo interface and make decisions. Since I'm operating on a metaphysical plane, I'm looking to prompt certain kinds of responses on the metaphysical plane. The SE Dom is going to look to knock that other person out of the metaphysical plane, to prompt in them responses that are revelatory against their will. So it's not the case that SE's just doing things. It's a frame of reference that understands frequently what makes the difference is who acts first and most decisively. It's not always the case, but that's their strategy. When we think about a function as a process, that's a good way to think about it. But we can also think about a type as a strategy towards life. My strategy towards life is to avoid surprise, more or less, on the external metaphysical plane, and to use words to affect the impacts I want. Okay. If you're not going on the pronounce, it's ayahuasca. Ayahuasca. Okay, I'll pronounce it like that. Do our brains produce DMT? And if so, why? I'm not familiar with this foundation. What does it mean? No, not today. Okay, cool. Maybe ex-drug addicts have in common, depending on their stated anti-particulars. Okay. Oh, it's still going. You will last 12 months tops. Well, we are about 1 month away from 12 months. And the thing is, Blue Nowhere, well, it's like what I said at the time back then. Rachel and I are great, except we haven't got her medication managed yet. And periodically, we've got these mental health things erupting that are very challenging for me as a relationship partner. I was right, because we got a psychiatrist, a private psychiatrist, got the right drug combination, and Rachel and I have the best imaginable relationship. We never speak an ill word to each other about anything. extremely positive, considerate, loving. We appreciate each other.
Yeah.
It's a quiet sort of smugness that exists when things are really good between two people and they really have the right two people together. Of course, it is true that we couldn't realize this awesomeness until we figured out the right combination of medications. And the psychiatrist worked with us, and it took a month or two with him to get it all figured out. But eventually, what it required was a serotonin reuptake inhibitor plus a benzo sleeping pill. And then I'm not sure what kind of drug the other drug is.
It's Zyprexa.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure what, like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's an inhibitor or a
I think it's an antidepressant.
Okay, so an antidepressant called, what's it called again?
It's Zyprexa.
Zyprexa. So with that, an interesting thing is the psychiatrist informed us that for bipolar mania, there has been this sort of new development that is extremely promising, which is it turns out if you mix Zyprexa and Prozac together, it is remarkably effective and powerful with bipolar mania. Now, if you buy that mix of drugs together as one drug, which they sell it as, it's very, very expensive. So our psychiatrist just prescribed for us Prozac and the Zyprexa together. As separate drugs. So that's a lot cheaper. And then what Rachel always has needed, and the doctors have continually ignored her until we went and got the right psychiatrist, and I talked to him, and that psychiatrist, and I cannot all praises due that psychiatrist any more than anybody in the world, because he had to deal with me. And believe me, I was cutting him no slack in that first conversation. Some of my words were, well, what good is your expertise if you can't answer any of my questions? So it's like he had to deal with me in full blast Eric mode. And he agreed with me about almost everything. And then solved my problem completely. And it's a beautiful, glorious thing to see genuine, honest, unencumbered, Rachel unencumbered by bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Thanks, babe.
So Blue Nowhere, this is where we get to see the limits of FI against NI/SI. An FI calculus of our relationship back then would have correctly said this relationship is not going to last because it's not FI sustainable. But an NI or an SI or a TI or a TE frame of reference would at least allow the possibility that the problem was wrong medication.
Yeah. And I think that we've got a pretty strong.
Yeah, this relationship is incredibly calm, comfortable, safe. I'm not jealous. I don't worry about anything. I'm not concerned like, oh shit, Rachel's gonna be mad. Hopefully she's not ever concerned like that either. We are easy squeezy. It is wonderful.
It is.
And it's like life's better having Rachel here too. It's not like, well, she's not a problem, but she's not an asset. It's great. I find her a necessary part of me. Like, if it were just me, I'd be sad. But after live streaming for a while, Rachel comes out. Oh, there's Rachel. And it makes me happier.
I love it too. I love seeing you live stream so much again too.
I know. Rachel encourages me to do what I want. I appreciate that.
PNP, you wanted to go outside?
Raphael, that's understandable. That if you've done a lot of drugs and had a lot of problems with it, that when you quit drugs, you may choose to frame it as the drugs were the problem. And that's understandable. Hopefully after you've been sober for a while, you recognize that it never was the drugs. It never will be the drugs. Anytime anybody develops an unhealthy relationship with some consumable or object or something in their life, it represents the same thing fundamentally. Avoidance of adulthood. Now, that doesn't mean that every consumption of drugs is an example of that. I mean, I'm saying when that becomes too much central to your life, it's always the same reason. It's avoidance of adulthood. It's I don't want to deal with so I will avoid it. A lot of people mistakenly think drugs are about feelings. That people who have a drug problem, it's because they're trying to make their feelings go away, trying to kill the pain. That it might be true for FI people, some like FI Dom, FI Tool. By and large, that has nothing to do with drug use, though. Okay, so how do you spell meow? Good question. Just like that, but with an H on the end. Has an H on the end. Yeah, too much of anything can be bad. And so the bottom line is the issue is always the same thing. It's, are you managing your firefighters well? A firefighter is the thing that you do when you feel like there's an emergency. So if your house is on fire, it's fine to squirt water on it to put the fire out. But the water is going to damage the house, but it's better than the fire. If there's no fire, you shouldn't squirt water on the house. Now, we all have firefighters, which are to say, when shit's really going south, man, I'm really feeling bad, I'm going to indulge myself in something to make me feel better. Gambling is actually my firefighter. When I feel really bad and mad about something and have this sort of like, well, fuck it attitude, I go and lose $100 playing poker. That's what I do. I'd like to say I go play poker, but that would suggest that sometimes I win. I never seem to win, so let's just describe it as what it is. In order to make myself feel better, I go lose $100 playing poker. That's an acceptable firefighter. Note, I only put out fires when my house is on fire. If I'm feeling good, I don't go lose $100. I don't need to put out the fire. I squirt water on my house when it's not on fire. So the thing is, it is very possible for people to get addicted to their firefighters. In other words, if you get a little indulgent about your firefighters, you can start interpreting every little disaster as a fire. Oh, I stubbed my toe. Time to go put out the fire. And that's basically how addiction happens, is a perfectly reasonable thing to have, a firefighter, becomes, gets mission creep. And it's no longer a firefighter, it's a manager, something you rely on a regular basis to deal with stuff. So really, that's the key understanding of addiction. If you let your firefighters have mission creep, you end up with addiction problems. Now, marijuana for me is not a firefighter. It's a manager with firefighter-esque qualities to it. So it is the case that if I'm like, I've had a long day out and it's been like, a long day, man, I cannot wait to get home and pull some bowls. But that's still not a firefighter, because that's managing a normal range of difficulty days and in a way that, my thought is better to use the money on cable or something instead of losing the money. Well, the thing is, when I buy weed, I don't lose any money because I exchange the money for weed. So I gain weed in exchange for the money.
It's a good exchange.
And then I smoke the weed and get the value of the money I spent by smoking the weed. So it's a zero-sum thing. Now, if I were to ever allow alcohol to be my firefighter, if I were to ever allow that again, then I would immediately go back to it, trying to make it a manager instead of a firefighter. And every day is reasons to drink, you know? So I had to fire that firefighter and replace it with a different firefighter. And the firefighter I replaced it with was gambling. Again, I gamble very rarely. The last time I played poker was pre-COVID. I probably would have played since then at least once, but COVID's made it too difficult. But I don't care very much, and I haven't had anything to firefight out. Occasionally, I'll go play poker just for fun without any fire at all. I'm more likely to do that if I'm going to play in a tournament. If I'm firefighting, I'll play cash games where it's like your chances of you winning money in cash games is very low because the rake will kill you. You can't play tight at a cash game and win money because the rake will kill you. The rake, and you'll get blinded off. But also, not being a good poker player works against me. So there's that too. And, in Kayla, a lot of people, their firefighter would be something like going shopping. A lot of women, for example, will say, I'm really upset. Well, I'm going to go spend $100 on new tops or something. So that's a totally reasonable firefighter to have too. For both parties, both the person who does that and me, the idea is I'm going to make myself feel better by spending money. Yeah, I'm just not good at poker, right? Blue nowhere. But the thing about poker that makes it, I guess, fun and potentially, and still a firefighter for me, is that even though I'm not good at it, I might always get lucky. And the reason I'm not good at it is one of the same reasons why I'm good at YouTube in some sense is I am super easy to read. My emotions are always on my face and they are saying exactly what I'm feeling. I have learned and trained myself in life to not pay attention to controlling my emotional displays, because I think that it shouldn't be relevant, right? That it's indicative of something. Why don't I train my emotional displays? Well, because if you piss me off, it's good for you to immediately know that. And if you make me happy, it's good for you to immediately know that. And if in fact I'm revealing some emotion that doesn't make me look so good, well, that's good. I can learn from this experience. I can grow from it. So in fact, if I'm looking like shitty and jealous, I want you to be able to call me out on that. So I can realize, oh, I'm indulging in some stupid emotions here. Yelling's a manager for me, Kayla. Yelling is like step 2 or 3 in trying to convince somebody who's being diligently dense. I could do that, Blue Nowhere, but I don't like to pay attention to having to control my displays. That makes it uncomfortable. I just sit there and draw pictures. I bring papers and draw pictures and then look at the cards and draw pictures. And I see cards that I'm going to play. I remember I was playing at one game and I had an ace, and the ace came out on the flop, and I bet, and everyone folded. And then one guy's like, "Man, it is so easy to tell when he hits it." And he said it to the person next to him. I thought, really? I guess it is easy to tell. I'm not practiced in hiding my emotions. I'm practiced in being expressive because I'm not an FI person. I do understand how to incorporate emotion into communication, which makes me very expressive. I worked out the other day that you seem angry because you were frustrated the other person is not accepting your logic. I'm not frustrated that a person doesn't accept my logic. I get frustrated when a person doesn't respond on point. So, in other words, if I say, somebody says to me, well, you can't be an ENTP because you're very detail oriented. I would say, detail oriented. If I were detail oriented, wouldn't I have bothered to put up the green screen and make this look nicer? And then they move on to something else. So it's as though what I said didn't exist. They said something, I countered it, they just move on to something else. You have to own your flow. So that means before you move on to something else, you either say, yeah, but I'm still right about the detail-oriented point because of meow, meow, meow. Or you say, okay, I can see you are not detail-oriented. One of those two things. You don't get to just leave trash on the table and pretend as you didn't. Like the thing is, I am not looking to be a good poker player. I accept that shortcoming in my life. I accept both that I like to play poker and that I'm not a good poker player. I would also say that when I'm president and we fix this travesty of a federal law prohibiting poker, online poker for Americans, I do a lot better on online poker where people can't see me. But, in America, you can't play online poker. I like online poker also because, you can deposit $20 and play in the 50-cent tournament or whatever. I like that. I don't like to lose money. I like to play poker. I understand losing money is the consequence of that, but I'd rather play longer and lose less. Do you think it's humanly possible to live without any firefighters, like on some monk shit? Or do you think we are very inevitably reliant in some way or another on firefighters? I mean, it's inevitable that there are firefighters in the mix because there has to be a distinction in life between discomfort, comfort, and pleasure. So it doesn't matter how monk-like you are. If you dig a hole for long enough, eventually it's going to become very uncomfortable. Your hands are going to get blistered, your arms are going to get tired, etc. At that point, the proper manager will say, stop and rest. Okay? But no matter how stark and lean your environment, setting, whatever, there will always be some aspect of that you find a relief in comparison to the other aspects of it. And that will turn into your firefighter in the absence of anything else. And every human being needs to be able to think in their head at dark moments, well, there's this to look forward to. Comfort and pleasure sound like the two girls bringing you a drink at the poker table. I'm comfort and I'm pleasure. Welcome. Hi, comfort. Hi, pleasure. I love your names. Dear Santa, I've been a very good girl this year. Please send me a firefighter or 6 wearing tiny shorts, bearing a big hose and a Dalmatian. Sounds like you got a party and you're planning a party, Mrs. Mom. I went to a stand-up comedy show one time, and the first comic gets up on stage, and he begins as follows. So these two firefighters are butt fucking in the back of the fire station. It's like, that's a great way to start a set. That's a great way to start a set. Well, why is it that firefighters engage in so much sodomy? Well, the answer is because there really aren't very many fires. And when they're not sodomizing each other, the only thing they have to do is polish their pole. I'd disband the fire department if I were the city of Arcadia. I'd get rid of it entirely. If there's a fire, you know what? It doesn't take a whole shit ton of expertise to squirt water on fire. Volunteer fire department's fine. Talk about a waste of taxpayer dollars. How much money are we paying to firemen, and how often do they actually have to fight fires? Like in Arcadia, every time an old lady breaks a hip, there arrive in front of her house an ambulance and 2 fire trucks, often a police car as well, but not necessarily. Why are the fire trucks there? Because they have absolutely nothing to do. There probably hasn't been a fire in Arcadia in 20 years. You know? Has anybody thought about this stuff? We have been spending the last 50 years making people build stuff that's basically fireproof due to code improvements, you know? It would be incredibly difficult to light my house on fire. I'd have to arson it, you know? You have to get some gasoline and stuff. All of the shingles are not wood. They're fire-resistant material. The siding is not wood. It's fire-resistant material. This is everybody's house. Why do we have a fire department that is draining? You know, the firemen make like $200,000 a year. Let's say there's 10 of them, plus a fleet of trucks and shit, plus support staff. You're talking about $5-10 million for the pole polishing brigade. You know, the ones who are at the top, when the fire alarms ring, they slide down the pole, right? How long has it been since anybody had to slide down that pole? It's for people's security. How is that improving security? How does having a fire department improve security? As I said, if someone's house is on fire and we didn't all inhabit this state of learned helplessness where we defer things to professionals, we would do the sensible thing and squirt water on it. Same thing the fire department does. There's no reason to think the fire department is better qualified to put out that fire than a whole neighborhood of people all squirting their hoses on it. Which probably be faster with the whole neighborhood of people squirting their hoses on it. We don't need firemen. Now, we probably do need forest firemen. So we want a fire department that is devoted towards fighting wildfires, but we don't want city fire departments devoted to putting out building fires because they never fucking happen. Even if 10 years from now, there's a big fire in Arcadia, burns down $3 million worth of property, we still would have saved a huge amount of money. Same thing with car insurance. I don't get car insurance for several years, I have saved, thousands of dollars or however much. As long as I don't have a crash during that time, I don't regret it. If I do have a crash, 99% chance it's going to be some sort of fender bender, which means I might have to chip out $500 out of my pocket to fix this person's car. Still saves a shit ton of money. So the only way that they can get everybody to buy car insurance is to force them, because it doesn't make any economic sense. Same thing with health insurance. Doesn't make any economic sense. Makes a lot more economic sense to be a cash patient until and unless you have some sort of substantial problem like cancer. We should keep some firefighters around for the calendars. That's fine. Look, nobody's saying we should eliminate all firefighter outfits. There could be a group of men whose job it is to be firefighters, to look sexy for the ladies who are like firefighters. That would be fine.
Calendars?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't have to pay them quite so much.
True.
I'm surprised, actually, Winston's mom, to hear that the Arcadia fire captain only made $122,082. Because what I was shocked to see, if you remember Pomona and the cop that shoved me, he made over $200,000 a year as a sergeant in the police department. Over $200,000 a year.
Sergeant who pushed you?
He was a sergeant.
Wow.
I mean, he must have gotten in some kind of trouble though, because after the city paid me $5,000, I thought it was all over. Wasn't going to think about it again, really. But then the sheriff's department called me in there and interviewed me to see if they wanted to prosecute that cop. So I was surprised that happened at all. Now, we're really going to actually prosecute him and fall through. I don't know, but I was pleasantly surprised and pleased and grateful to the sheriff's department for caring enough to do their job, even though I wasn't calling them and haranguing them about it at all. As far as I was concerned, when the city paid me $5,000, they bought my acquiescence on this, which means I no longer had an opinion about it. I didn't care if the cop got prosecuted or not, because that's what they paid for. They paid for me not to care about that. I'm certainly not going to cheat them. That's what I told the sheriff's department too. But they said, well, if asked by the prosecutor, would you testify? I said, yeah, of course. That was the absolute truth. I would do my civic duty. It's up to you guys and the prosecutors as to whether or not you want to prosecute these people, and whether or not you think it's whether or not you want to prosecute this guy, and whether or not you think it's a reasonably winnable case. To the extent that you decide you do want to prosecute it, I will tell the absolute truth, and the absolute truth will support a guilty verdict. However, here are the challenges you face in prosecuting this police officer. First of all, as a juror, I might conclude no harm, no foul. The guy didn't sustain any injuries. Better off to just let it go. The way you have to attack. I mean, I articulated all this shit out for the sheriffs, and they were. I'd like to think encountering something they never encountered before. I think it's clear to say that they had never encountered somebody like me before as a victim of a crime.
Neither have I.
Because, they expected me to be either crying for his blood or scared or whatever. Instead, I just explained to them all the dynamics and considerations that the prosecutors and the police would have to make before deciding whether or not to prosecute this guy. And I suggested that it was probably, iffy as to whether they would get a conviction because of the fact that as a witness, I was going to tell the truth, which means I'm not going to hype up. I'm not going to make an appeal to like, I haven't been able to sleep ever since feelings. I'm not going to make an FI appeal. So I'm just going to tell them the truth. I was satisfied. I felt like justice was served from my perspective, but the state of California has every right to expect its own justice for a rights violation. Did it comprise a rights violation? Yes, he violated my rights. Does that mean legally that he is guilty of some crime? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the interests of everybody are served by prosecuting the case. So I think it would have been better if they did prosecute it, but obviously they didn't because I never got caught, never got subpoenaed. I mean, they could have made a deal with the guy too. The prosecutor could have made a deal with the cop. He could have agreed to some sort of internal discipline. Who knows? They didn't. They said they were going to inform me, but they might have. But I moved out of that house where they were going to mail me the conclusion of the matter. The sheriff said they would send me something that said whether or not they decided to prosecute and how the thing had resolved. But it's into that old address. I don't live there anymore. So if they did send it, then I never got to see it. And if they didn't send it, then I have no way of knowing. How to develop child. Please give tips. Dom Turk loops are kind of healthy if you're developing your child. What's your child? What does that mean? There are a lot of people coming here with some C.S. Joseph metaphors that I don't use, so you have to clarify. Dom, tool, tertiary or third, or seeking or fourth. Relief, tertiary? Tertiary is child. The relief function is fourth. Okay? Relief function is fourth. Third slot is child, you say? Okay. So one of the reasons we don't want to use that term or that metaphor is it's extremely misleading. The third slot function does not work like a child at all. If anything, it functions like the rather hands-off CEO. It says, remember, this is the overarching framework. If we don't succeed here on FE metrics, or if we fail dramatically on FE metrics, whatever other outcomes are attained have run afoul of the central the central revenue streams here. Because as every individual gets paid in their third slot function and their fifth slot function. Okay, so Kayla, personality hacker uses a child with a 3-year-old car in their model. That's wrong. It's misleading. So we have to understand slot mechanics better than that. Your third slot function functions as an absolute value that in which you get paid. So why am I so right all the time? Well, because I want to make sure, at least to validate on the competency end of the FE metric. There's two ends to the FE metric, warmth and competency. The fundamental FE concern is that you perceive me as both warm and competent. But depending on your stack, you may strongly prioritize one of those over the other if you prioritize either. If you're FE polar, you don't care how other people perceive you. But I'm not FE polar, I'm FE third. So I do care how other people perceive me, and it is an absolute value. You can think of the dominant slot as the implicit value. In order to even go into this field, it needs to allow me to do something with my dominant function. Think of the tool function as how you're interacting with that new field that you go into. And the third slot function is a constraint. No matter how I'm acting in this field, using my NE and TI, I can't take actions that don't validate on that third slot function. Now, note, my dominant function is not a hero. It's my native manner of engaging. My tool function is not a parent. It's a tool function that I'm using to engage with things. My third slot function is not a child. It's an absolute value. It's a constraint. My fourth slot function, it is a relief function, but it's not a baby. It's not a grandma or whatever other nonsense you want to say. It is a relief function and a seeking function. It's also critically integrated in your first. So in other words, being an NE DOM defines how I use SI as a normal way, and the other way of using SI comprises my relief function. So The way I use SI in a normal way is I will collect little tidbits of ideas and thoughts and abstractions and arguments and stuff from everywhere, including from you, from this, from wherever. I'll remember how argumentation resolved. I'll remember what ideas stood, which ones didn't, and I'll forget all the experiential data. Now, SE is designed to have you retain your experiential data and to extrapolate forward from that. But I am using SI as it's not meant to be designed. It's not meant to be used. I'm instead keeping track of a bunch of abstract representations, low resolution data rather than high resolution data. The high resolution data I relegate to the experiential plane. Remember, we use functions in two different manners of time, a turn-based modality and a real-time modality. So for me, the relief function for SI is SI in real time. It's getting into the bath, feeding myself, rah-rahing in bed with the, oh, it's so comfortable, that kind of stuff. That's the relief function for me, even though SI has another component to it, keeping track of your business, your schedule, and other things that aren't physical experiences. That half of it is not a relief for me. So in order to fully understand cognitive functions, the mechanics of the slots and stuff, step one or step zero, step -1 is jettison metaphor as much as you can, because that's going to be misleading. So get rid of those terms, hero, child, witch, whatever. Those are all garbage. Step two, understand that there are 4 planes upon which people attend, 4 fields. Now, I can have my attention to the external metaphysical field like it is now, to words and ideas that are being communicated. I can attend my attention to my internal metaphysical field, thoughts and ideas that aren't being communicated. I can attend my attention to the physical external field, stuff and moving stuff around and dealing with objects, or I can attend to the internal physical field. Oh, my back hurts right now, you know? That's something that is an observation, which means I'm not making any arguments to justify why there are 4 fields. I'm merely observing that there are and pointing out that it's inherently obvious to anybody that there are 4 fields. If you wanted to say you haven't proved there's 4 fields, you're right. I'm saying it's an observation. I don't think I should have to prove there's 4 fields any more than I should have to prove that the sun sets in the west, because all of our experience is consistent with it, and nobody can come up with any other field that could possibly exist. That's not 4 sides of the mind, right? That's a metaphor. 4 sides of the mind is a metaphor. Your mind doesn't have 4 sides. Why doesn't your mind have 4 sides? Because it's not a square, nor is it a cube. I would have 6 sides anyway, but so how would another type? All human beings can attend on each of the 4 fields and will attend on each of the 4 fields to some extent or another. It's just that there are 2 functions that are native to each field. And like for me, I'm an extroverted intuitor. So let's say I'm required to do SE by the circumstances. I'll tell the story I always tell because it's a great example of it. I one time pulled a stop sign. This dude who was being a big douchebag wanted to go when it was my turn. I just went like, what the hell? I didn't even do anything really. I just was like, what the hell? And he pulled over like, you want to go, bro? And of course, at the stop sign, my thing is, well, I was about to go, but now that you do this, no, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to be pressured into going. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction, right? So I sat there in the car. The guy who got out of the car turns out to be, he's a little car, but he gets out of it. He's a buff, big Marine guy. He's got a wife beater on that says USMC, and he's got big muscles. Like, if it happened in a movie, it would lack verisimilitude. You'd be like, no, come on. Why would the guy in the car be this big Marine guy? And it was. And he started walking towards me. SE. I said, SE, he's coming to do violence to me, I could tell. Like, this guy is going to hit me or something. So what's required? SE. I can either drive away, get out of the car, and punch him or whatever. But what do? I say, Are you going to use physical violence? I extrovertedly intuit in a circumstance that is best served by extroverted sensing. So this is what everybody faces in life, is that we have a default approach, namely our dominant function. And it's conjoined, the shape and form of it is decided by the second function, which deliberation function we use, or which whatever function. So for me, it's my dominant's any, my deliberation function is TI. So of course, I go to my go-to when something's requiring me to do something. This guy's on his way to the car. I have to do something. As everybody, I'm too habituated to being me to reflect in that moment. This is not a time for extroverted intuition. Too much time pressure. So I said that to him. It worked. He stopped in his tracks. He stopped moving towards me. And then he started again. And I was out of ammunition. I just said the same thing again. I said, are you going to use physical violence? And he didn't stop this time. And the next thing I knew, I had been slapped. My sunglasses had been slapped off of my face into the middle of the street, and he was walking back to his car. Now, this is a perfect example of how one is a person who's going to manage this set of data with their dominant and tool functions unless they have a chance to metacognate about it, conclude I'd be better off approaching it this way or something like that, which is rarely going to happen. So yeah, the four sides of the mind theory is a way to avoid providing real justifications. It's a metaphor that allows you to get out of whatever by just saying, I'll switch to another side of the mind. There's no legitimacy to it argumentationally. In other words, it doesn't say, here's why this metaphor is actually representative of some quality implicit to the human being. Nor does it say, this is a convenient descriptive metaphor that can help us to see how people manifest different parts of themselves, but don't mistake it for something like cognitive functions, which is a process analysis. That's the thing. C.S. Joseph is not doing any real analysis about how to think. Like, he's not going, this is an object of analysis. This thing I'm saying about it is an example of analysis about that object. This object represents a process. And this kind of analysis is different regarding the process and the object in the following ways. He's not doing any of that at all. He has no idea. My daughter was pretty clumsy, and she's an SE Dom. Remember that really being an SE Dom is about the frame. So it's like an SE Dom goes through the world thinking that just doing it is probably the best way to deal with the problem, whatever it is. That if there's a lingering problem, it's probably because people are talking about it too much, thinking about it too much, and not just doing it. The point of things is to be able to execute, and that's where good results come from. It's a mistake to think that SE Doms are necessarily better at sports or that they are great at physicalities in the world, because how an SE Dom manifests depends a lot on what kinds of environments they're being presented to act within. ESTPs, ESFPs are not well suited for classroom environments in general. Delilah had a lot of trouble in elementary school because she wanted so much to take action to get FE payoffs. And that's the tricky job of the ESTP in general is that their FE, absolute value, they get paid in FE. SE is best suited to get paid in FE in certain circumstances and not others, you know? So what's a good way for an ESTP to get paid in FE? Well, where does action work best? Like picking up on chicks, right? If I don't need to necessarily do it right. I just need to be the active one, and everyone else is being passive and scared. I'm going to get the chick, right? Okay, so Jade says, my NETI isn't putting this into a system that Jade can accept. CS Joseph does. And I think you're downplaying extroverted sensors. I'm not downplaying them or upplaying them. I'm describing their frame. As far as, I wanted to socialize and entertain the teacher in school. Right, that's what an ESTP wants to do. And, of course, most classrooms aren't really conducive to that. So, Jade, I understand that a TI valid cognitive function understanding is much less frequently going to give you clear instructions about what you should do or how you should do to improve yourself or something. Because a proper understanding of it is more nuanced than that. I also accept that that for non-TI people, these sort of discussions are ones that are best left delegated to the experts. The problem you're having here, Jade, is you're saying, because you're letting me look under the hood and you're showing me how complicated expertise actually looks like, that you can't be an expert for me because I don't want to process such complicated ideas or something. But ultimately, the ideas themselves being complicated or not is irrelevant. The point is, you can hold or affirm certain specific positions about a given cognitive function or given type and justify it with various ways if you want to yourself. Or you can say, all right, what I'm hearing here is what genuine expertise looks like. And so even though I don't want to engage with the material on that deep of a TI level, I can acknowledge at least that this is the sort of thing that's best validated with TI. And if I'm going to afford somebody the status of expert, I'd be better served affording Eric's status of expert. True, C.S. Joseph's information theater might be more comfortable to me, but it's ultimately best useless and at worst harmful. So Jade, what I'd like you to do, if you have a moment, if you're willing, is to take a look at this video here that I made, which is called specifically, Is MBTI a Pseudoscience? And remember, unlike most people who will try to answer this question, I am not answering it as an advocate. I'm not answering it as somebody who has a position that, no, it's not a pseudoscience. Yes, it is, or whatever. I'm actually parsing out all the relevant considerations and giving a meaningful, complete, correct answer, not just an advocacy. See, most people reduce this issue to an advocacy without including relevant comparisons and larger frames. But I do that. So if you watch that video, you will have a much better understanding of whether or not MBTI is a pseudoscience. Like, do you think it's a pseudoscience or not, Jade? Do you have an opinion on it? I think it's important to distinguish function proficiency from function preference. They're not necessarily correlated. Practicing make better. Okay, so I agree with you, but I would add a detail to that. I'd say it's important to understand the difference between function between that which is habituated, in other words, that which you rather than that which you prefer, from that which correlates strongly enough with a skill that you can practice it. There are those things that correlate strongly enough with a skill that you can practice it, but also whether or not it will do you any good to practice it depends on where it is in your stack. There are only certain places in the stack that you can even consider practicing or getting better at it. Third slot and fourth slot are both areas where you will improve. Third slot, you can improve with some willful attention to improving. Fourth slot naturally improves as you age. Well, MBTI is not just a test, right? That's not true. The MBTI is just a test. MBTI represents an understanding of typology that's different from C.S. Joseph's and it's different from mine. So when C.S. Joseph says it's just a test, that's his way of avoiding substantially addressing anything that MBTI says. But if you don't want to use physical force for legal reasons, as you said last time, what other option do you have then to openly speak up on the conflicts of everyone that doesn't want to fight a guy is an EDOM? No, I said, I'm not a fighter. I don't want to use physical force for lots of reasons. Number one, I know I'm very likely to lose that fist fight. I'm not a good fighter, right? I'm not strong and fisty and manly in that way. So there's no point in me engaging in the fisticuffs. Number two, I know that until it reaches fisticuffs, I am winning and will continue to win. If we're talking back and forth and arguing, if we're having words, he's getting his ass whooped. And so third, if he does hit me, I'm going to make sure that his unfair, unreasonable, and unjust seizing of the frame in that fashion incurs the appropriate legal consequences. I won't join him in that frame because that will minimize my ability to do so. Yeah, colloquially, MBTI is used interchangeably with typology. So it's like there was a time when I was a kid if you asked for a Coke, they'd say, what kind? Because Coke stood in for soft drink. You're like, can I have a Coke? Yeah, you want orange, soda, 7-Up, or Pepsi? Nowadays, if you say you want a Coke, you mean a Coke. But it used to be that was a stand-in term for all soft drinks. I'm a big fan of the idea that we use each of the functions. I think all of the studies, including sociology, are equally valid. You mean you're TI polar? Yeah. Okay, well, and that's fine, Jade. I totally approve and appreciate that. Jade is saying, I'm TI polar. So I think all the studies are equally valid. And I'm going to choose the one I feel best about. Great. Because you're being honest. You're saying, I'm not capable or interested or willing to determine what's correct. I will afford them all equal legitimacy and just do what makes me feel good. Nothing wrong with that. That's consistent with your function stack. But the problem, what does come in as not working is when you come in and say, well, C.S. Joseph's right about this. You see, you give up the opportunity to make such claims when you conclude correctly that being TI polar means I should just go with what feels better to me and recognize the fact that I'm not going to know or be able to articulate what's correct. Yeah, TE will improve with age for you. This is true for everybody in their fourth slot function. Your fourth slot function improves slowly, gradually over time, whether you try to or not. And the reason is because you have a lifetime of problems with your fourth slot function. And when those problems are significant enough to jolt your being, then you avoid at least that degree of mistake again. So it's not so much that you get better at it, it is you get less bad at it. Let me get my bong. That's the thing I use to smoke marijuana. And without it, why, I'm not smoking any marijuana, am I? And that won't do. Where is it? It's like, this is not a big space. And yet, and my bong is fairly large. Yet I can misplace it so easily. Isn't that strange? I found it though. It's right here. Now where's the weed? Did Rachel take it? No, here it is. Rachel has her own bottle that she takes some of the weed, puts it in there, so that we're never either without our own bottle. If TI equals logos and logos equals masculine, or TI plural or feminine, I don't think TI logic is a masculine or feminine thing. I think, unfortunately, the world has, in the paucity of understanding cognitive functions and types, has drawn some very silly conclusions. It is true that women in general are more likely to be feelers. I mean, it's probably true in general that people in general are more likely to be feelers. But I'd say if you take the general population, there's a higher percentage of feelers amongst women than there are amongst men. But most of the women are from Venus, men are from Mars shit is all bullshit. Complete bullshit. Because if I'm a INTP woman, I am not going to be like, does this dress make me look fat? No INTP woman is ever going to ask that question. They're going to think, well, who fucking cares? How incredibly stupid and banal. So the idea that women care about that may be broadly true, but it's broadly true in the sense that the vast majority of women, as men, are censors. Censors care about boring stuff. I'm sorry, censors, but you do. You care about boring stuff. The fact that you're here means not always you care about this. That's interesting. But in my opinion, censors care about boring stuff. They just do. It's like my dad telling us these stories about what he did today. You know, first I went to the Ralph's and I picked up there was a good deal on ground round, so I got a pound of that, and I had an incredible coupon for Bob. So, okay, well, I can't even conceive of remembering any of those things long enough to relate it, let alone caring about it at all or thinking it would be a relevant thing to talk about or something. You know, it's like, that's fine though. I don't think he's a bad person for caring about boring shit. I just don't care about it myself, you know? There's nothing wrong. Somebody has to care about boring shit. If it weren't for my ESTJ dad, you know, life would be a lot harder for me. So I am not critiquing caring about boring shit. I'm just saying, chances are, woman or man, there's going to be more difference between, you know, intuitive and censor than man and woman. Instead of saying men are from Mars, women are from Venus, it should say intuitives are from La La Land and censors get frustrated by that. That'd be a better generalization. I mean, I think Objective Personality and C.S. Joseph are great examples of what happens when you get it wrong in way A and when you get it wrong in way B. Objective personality, they didn't do any TI at the beginning. So they didn't say, okay, what's sustainable argumentationally? They said, what protocols that are what you call science theater can we put into place that are consistent with what we know about science, which isn't very much. And so what they did is basically they say, the reason it's objective is because when you send in a video clip for us to type you from, I, Dave, watch that clip and give you a type in one room. Separately, without listening to me and my information, Shannon watches it and give you a type from another room. I mean, that's all that doesn't, it's not necessarily the case even that they're more likely to get the right type by determining it independently of each other. It might be the case they'd be more likely to get the right type by discussing it together. So it's not, after all, it's not like there's a double blind aspect here to it. It's just a gesture at that idea. So what happens when you don't think initially about whether your architecture withstands scrutiny, and you build a massive house of illusion on top of it with hundreds of different subtypes, rendering the whole concept of typology utterly meaningless. The reason, and this is what I mean by this, is why are there types? If you haven't asked that question, thought about it at all, then you can't possibly do any work in the field that's meaningful. The reason there are exactly 16 types is because of the inherent relationships of proportionality, inverse proportionality, and exclusivity that occur between cognitive functions based on their nature and area scope of, nature and jurisdiction, and based on their slot placement. So there's two kinds of mechanical exclusive things going on. The reason I can't be any FE is because in order to be fully realized as a being, a dominant extroverted intuitor has to have as a second function a deliberation function, because action and deliberation work together successfully. Action and interface do not. Action assumes that I am going to think out what's correct and then act on it. Interface assumes I'm going to know what's correct as it's occurring in real time. You can't both. Basically, if you say you're NEFE, you're saying, right now, I'm going to jump in the pool and climb the tree. But which one are you going to do first? You're doing both right now. You can't do them both right now. They're exclusive of each other. So to say that you can have a subtype that's NEFE is to say that it's possible to both climb a tree and jump in the pool at the same time. So when men get all ragey and stuff, they are women. I am not playing with, I'm not misogynistic at all. I am saying that almost always when somebody gets ragey, it's indicative of that reality is conflicting with their important understanding of what reality ought to be in some significant way. Anger, in general, occurs when the prime directive is not being met. What's the prime directive? The prime directive is to close the distance between map and territory. My map says for the next 10 minutes or so, everything's going to go as is going now. The internet's not going to quit on me. That there's not going to be a bomb dropped on Los Angeles. That Rachel's not going to suddenly have a stroke and fall. You know, so I have a map that projects forward for some distance. It predicates a lot of things remain the same, so I can act upon those to change those things I want to change. But sudden, dramatic, unexpected events can be extraordinarily shaking to a person's ontology and can, in fact, create a great deal of trauma. Why? Because the prime directive, that is to say, every human being, how do they go through life? What's driving everything? If you have a single engine that's driving everything, it is the compelling need people have for their maps to be right. Well, you can make your map right by having it actually best represent the reality of this mapping, but you can also have your map be right by ignoring ways that it's different from reality, or you can also have your map be right by only focusing on reality and thinking your map doesn't care, it doesn't matter at all, so it's right enough. These are different strategies that people have based on their personality type. For INFJ, the reality is be able to know what Mia in reality, why Mia in reality, because of Mia and map. So the INFJ has the most trust, probably, of any type in their own map. And they should, because least frequently does their map run afoul of reality. As a matter of fact, if you have perfect polished NIFE all the time, you can pretty consistently conclude that, yes, people will respond well to it. You'll be able to influence them as you need to, when you need to. You'll be able to ask of them when you need usefulness from them, and a bunch of other things. Your map's pretty damn solid, right? Of course, that's a depressing reality for INFJs a lot of the time, because unlike INTJs have the same thing going on. They have a great deal of faith in their map because it's consistently validated by map reality stuff. Note, neither of these types think that their map is something that they work on. The map is what it is. They know the map. They don't decide the map. And reality proves them right most of the time, and occasionally proves them wrong. So note also, implicit in this whole idea is that prediction occurs. Everybody makes predictions, whether they're explicit predictions or just operating on assumptions. So for the INTJ, they know the map and they see how reality deviates from the map, and their conclusion is reality should change as follows. INFJ, same thing, except with social systems. They see how reality deviates from the map, and they think reality should change as follows. Now, in contrast, an NEDOM thinks they make the map and thinks reality should conform to the map, but they understand that ultimately they are constrained by reality in what they can make the map. So in any DOM's ideal world, if I say things eloquently enough and describe things well enough and frequently enough, then that's what reality becomes. Of course, that's in the same sense that It's not the case that the NI DOM can really trust their map that much. It's also not the case that the NE DOM can really make reality that much. But that's our overconfidence in our dominant function. For like an SE DOM, they say, I will compel the map to change by changing reality. If my map and my reality aren't in coordination, I will just take action in reality, and the map's going to have to adjust. If that's for, like if I'm an ESTP, it's going to be like my reality is this. I justify it with these things on the map, and if you point out other stuff on the map that's inconsistent, I'll say we only care about these things on the map, TI things, and the very narrowly scoped TI things of ESTPs. If I'm an ESFP, I'm going to say there's a map. Maps? What? You mean doing stuff and feeling it? Yeah. Well, your map here is that a lot of times ESFP's maps lead them terribly astray, right? They operate on this map that says, how other people perceive me is a matter of some concern. So I'll tell them how to perceive me. I'm completely oblivious to the fact that that's not how FE works, right? Another kind of type would be like, SI DOMs. They they don't have a map of the world so much as they have a map of their own experience in the world and the projection of that as representing whatever universalities there might be. So if I consistently, if I go to Bob's Indian restaurant and have dinner and don't like it, and then go maybe to a second Indian restaurant, Joe's Indian restaurant, have dinner and don't like it, I'm going to conclude that Indian food is bad rather than I don't like Indian food, because I just project my own experience as representative of, well, this is what the universals are. How does NI-SI work in the second slot compared to action or deliberation functions seem more obvious as a tool? All right, so the reason NI or SI would be in the second slot is because the dominant function is an interface function. So a task suited for action deliberation is writing and delivering a speech. A task suited for interface knowledge function is leading a symposium in which a group of people each take turns talking about a given idea. The reason why the interface one requires knowledge is because the person who's running this symposium, who's leading the symposium, when the person goes in there, they know what their job is. Their job is to make sure everybody gets to talk about an equivalent amount of time, and nobody gets to talk for too long, and that the interest in the topic is continuing to move forward because the quality of the words being spoken is higher because the limits on everybody are stricter, so they have to refine what they're doing better. Okay, that's an interface function. I can't know what I'm going to do until I deal with the real-time data. Okay, so it turns out Jody's the person who hums and haws a lot before she starts talking. How am I going to deal with that as the moderator? This is a knowledge interface, issue. Why is it a knowledge interface issue? Because you have to know that about Jody without having to logically figure out anything. And you have to sort of observe. Okay, I get her. I know this person. She's one of those persons who hums and haws a bunch. How are you gonna deal with that? Maybe you're gonna tell her, hey, you're humming and hawing too much. But that would be poor interface. That would be doing a poor job of interfacing with the social dynamics of the thing. It might be a good job of interfacing with the physical dynamics of the thing. In other words, if your only concern is attaining everybody talks well and the talking that happens is entertaining for somebody listening, then the TE approach wouldn't care about her feelings and wouldn't consider that being harsh might impact the whole vibe and ruin the whole thing. Okay. But they might think, to fix this problem, I'm going to just TE it. An FE person might say, just a reminder, after everyone's had a chance to speak, just a reminder, if we can please all begin our comment right when I call on you and keep it short, because I'm going to cut you off, and we're trying to keep as little dead air here out of respect for the audience or something like that. Some generally said advice, and then that would be how they'd approach it. So in other words, how are you going to approach managing this symposium is not a question you can answer. You can give a couple of general things, goals you're going to try to attain. How you're going to achieve those goals, you cannot answer it because you need to see the system moving in order to correctly act upon it. It's a dynamic system. In contrast, if I'm asked to write and deliver a speech, that's an action deliberation type of thing. I get to do all the deliberating and preparation ahead of time. I get to figure out what I'm going to say. If I make this wrong argument and realize later, I cross it out, replace it, edit it, blah, blah, blah. Once I've got it all figured out ahead of time and set up, then I go and act and deliver the whole thing. Now, let's say after the speech, there might be an interface phase where people ask me questions. I have to answer them. Well, that's fine, because as long as it's about the area in which I'm being talked about, it's still the same thing. I've deliberated out all these issues ahead of time. So when they ask me the question, I simply provide the necessary action. That's very different than the symposium thing, where I can't anticipate exactly how each individual might deviate from the ideal in this symposium setting until they demonstrate them doing it. I hope that was very revelatory and educational about why it is the case that an action function must be paired with the deliberation function and a knowledge function must be paired with an interface function. The reason is because action deliberation is about static systems, and knowledge interface is about dynamic systems. Thanks, your Huckleberry. I think I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, actually. I think it's a good time to end this live stream and think about what productive thing maybe we can do today or something. Thanks a lot for being here, and I really do appreciate your attention. It means a lot to me, and your willingness to listen to me. Consider what I'm saying. Yeah, my birthday is 4/27/71. April 27th, 71. If you want to know what it is for astrology reasons, I can also tell you the time I was born. Do you remember off the top of your head?
What?
What time I was born? Do you remember?
1:29 a.m.
1:29 a.m. That is often useful for astrology things. Is that what you're doing it for? Shig O Fumi? If you're not doing it for that, then it doesn't matter. Casual Cognition is a good channel also. There's that one guy who he's an INFJ, I think. He does cognitive types. Is that what he's called? I don't know. He's good. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know why you wanted to know what my birthday was.
Who asked?
Shig O Fumi.
Oh.
The birth location is Panorama City in the county of Los
Panorama
Angeles.
City.
In the county of Los Angeles.
Do you want my info too?
Lazy self. Rachel's is 1:16:85 in Yonkers.
Yep.
And I don't know the time.
10:40 p.m.
10:40. All right, thanks a lot. Any location for typing? No, that's for like astrology stuff, Jade. Yeah, apparently if you do your astrology charts, it doesn't just matter what day; it matters what time and where you were born. As to why, I don't know. I have no idea. But those are pieces of information people need to have in order to do a full astrology chart.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, thanks for being here, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.